Welcome to the Association 100 podcast. The A100 podcast is an extension of our Association 100 bi-monthly newsletter that focuses on best practices, top trends, helpful ideas, and smart strategies and tactics that work in the world of associations. The podcast will feature meaningful conversations with association professionals across the country, taking a deeper dive into trending topics, offering insights that both inform and inspire. Welcome back for our second episode of the Association 100 podcast. I'm Colin Gallagher, and I'm joined by my co-host, Megan Henning. Today we're talking all things podcasting and what it takes for an association to host a successful podcast, as well as how you tackle tough or complex topics. We're excited to welcome our guest today, Evan Sparks. Evan is the Senior Vice President of Member Communications and also the Editor-in-Chief of the ABA Banking Journal at the American Bankers Association. He's also their podcast host. Evan, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. It's good to be here.
Well, let's get started. Evan, we're so excited to have this conversation with you. This is something that our Association 100 audience is really interested in. So let's talk about your role at ABA first. You have a lot of responsibilities here. Talk to us about your role.
Sure. So I lead the member communications team, which is I like to think of as kind of the writers group within our organization. So we are a large staff association. Our membership we're the largest financial trade association in the country, representing banks of all sizes across the country. And so we have a lot of digital communications channels, print communications channels. We have a lot of ways that we're trying to get in touch with our members. This team includes our marketing copywriters, so people who are working closely with our marketing team on the messaging side, the creative copy. We publish a magazine, which I edit. We publish multiple magazines. We publish multiple email newsletters, including a daily newsletter that goes to over 100,000 people and is one of kind of our signature products. And then we also launched a podcast about 5 years ago that covers all things banking and tries to sort of do what we do in our digital communications channels, our written communications channels, but just designed for our members to consume in a passive way, where they just provide an additional touch point for our members to get connect with ABA content.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. You've been here for almost 10 years now. What do you like most about working in an association? And what's your biggest challenge?
All right. So what I like most, I love our members. I really love being able to work for members and get out on the road and connect with our members. And I work for banks, so we get to see banks of all sizes and the effects that they have in their community. I was on the road, not long ago, out in. On my way back from a conference, I went to Carlsbad, New Mexico, to do some magazine reporting and connect with a couple of our bankers there. And it was just really neat to be able to go into the bank and see the customers coming into the bank and meet with many of the leaders in the community and see how this the story was about sort of the impact of of climate risk supervision on the banking industry, and particularly on community banks in oil and gas intensive communities. But what I really loved about being there in person was getting to see the powerful impact that a community bank has in a town like Carlsbad. But banks have enormous impacts on communities anywhere, and so it's really exciting to be able to help tell their stories and make sure that bankers are well equipped to deal with whatever's coming out of Washington, whatever trends they're facing in the global marketplace, and be able to respond to those and be strategic. And that's what we're all about. So it's really exciting to have that role in helping to serve our members. And that's what I think one of the fun things about working in an association is getting to know people in all these different industries across the country. One of the biggest challenges, I would say, is that because we are a large association, we have a lot of different issues. And so it is, and everything these days is a banking issue. So I have to be aware of lots of different dynamics that are going on in the policy community, in the national and global trends, and trying to pay attention to these and understand how these are going to affect banks, community banks that maybe have one branch in a small town, or some of our largest global financial institutions, any of which might be our ABA members. So, if I think about the war in Ukraine, is a banking issue because of the sanctions that are being imposed. climate change is a banking issue now because regulators are examining regulators and members of Congress are examining how and where banks need to evaluate the risk of climate change on their portfolios and their operations, financial stability risks. So that's a banking issue. There are issues where policymakers who want to say, well, banks must serve this kind of industry, or they want to say, or banks can't serve this kind of legal industry. And that happens at the federal level and at the state level. And so all of those industries that may be controversial for one reason or another on one side of the political spectrum suddenly become implicated as banking issues. And and knowing where the lines are on that and where we need to communicate and how do we need to communicate that to our members is a challenge. So it's one that I spend a lot of time working on and thinking about, and working with my amazing colleagues here at ABA who are very smart and engage deeply on these policy issues to figure out how we can talk about them with our members.
Yeah, well, with members of such different sizes, you have these small community banks and then big banks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever find where there's competing interests on an issue? How do you handle that?
Yeah, that is certainly something that exists, and it exists at a larger association more than a smaller association. So one of the things we really focus on is we advocate on issues, and I'm not a lobbyist. I say we. I mean, I'm not doing the engagement with policymakers. I'm like writing about it for our members or talking about it for our members on a podcast. But we as an association really engage deeply on issues where the stakes are high for our members and where there's where we find a position of unity, where we can see an opportunity for the industry to come together on particular issues. And then there are some issues that are, you'd be surprised, there might be some issue that affects, half a dozen banks very deeply. They're very specialized banks because banks have so many different diverse business models, but it doesn't really affect other members. So we engage on that, that as well. But it's really about trying to find common ground, and this is one of the reasons member communications is so important. We need to stay in touch with all these members and make sure they know what we're doing for them, where we're engaging for them, and that we are engaging across a humongous range of issues. So it's not just this one issue where they may feel a different type of bank is engaged with on a different kind of level. It's actually, we have there's such a huge portfolio of issues that we are working on behalf of our members, and we need to communicate that to them so they see the full perspective of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's so important for associations, because I know at several of the ones we worked at, sometimes, especially on the advocacy front, wins can take a long time. Mm-hmm. But as long as you're all the way along the way at every point telling them, hey, this is what we're doing on your behalf, this is how you can get involved, this is what's going on, it makes a world of difference in terms of their engagement and their excitement about what you're doing and just the ROI they feel like they're getting. Yeah,
that's one of the, telling members about what you're doing for them is something I spend a lot of time thinking about how to do it well, because we are generally, my colleagues, we don't like to be braggy people, right?
Yeah.
We're not people who are like, oh, well, look at how great we are. That's, that's.
Sometimes you got to do it that way.
No, I know. And, you want to make sure the members know we're the ones who engaged on this for you. Like, we are bringing value to the dues that you pay to us and to the time that you give to us. I mean, that's one of the things that's really important in any association. The members give so much time engaging. They're calling their lawmakers, they're doing grassroots advocacy, they're participating in committees and working groups. I mean, every comment letter that we put together there's a banker working group that's offering feedback on that and saying, how does this apply to my bank, and how does this apply to Joe's bank, and they're all figuring out, helping our staff figure out what the real world impacts of some of these policy proposals are going to be. So we've got to communicate to them and say, like, we did this for you. And one of the challenges we have is if it takes, I feel like I've said something in an email or in an article or in a podcast or whatever, I've said it, I may have said it, 50 times, and a member may only have heard it once, they might not remember it. So that's one of the things we as communications professionals have to keep in mind. We've got to say things more than sometimes feels comfortable, because they are, we feel sick of the message by the end of it because we've said it so many times, but a typical member may only have heard it a couple times, and we want to really drive it home. why it's important to be engaged, what we're doing on your behalf, and how we're trying to serve you as an organization. So that's one of the reasons I thought the podcast would be a good addition when we started trying it out, just because there are, we have had a lot of written communications at the time, but the podcast is an opportunity to engage passively with someone and give them something that, this is the way I consume podcasts. I listen to it while I'm commuting, or while I'm mowing the lawn, or while I'm, doing dishes and making the kids lunches at night. And so I stay in touch with, kind of news of the day, association issues, banking issues, just in this kind of way that allows me to hear and listen without having to sit down and give my full attention to it. And so you get a lot of good information that way, and I wanted to make sure our members had an opportunity to connect with us that way as well, in case they're not reading it. They're not reading our emails in full depth because they have a lot of other things to do on any given day. There's a way for them to connect with us that might work better for them.
I love that. So let's talk more about the podcast.
Yeah.
So you said you've been at it for about 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So what went into that launch?
It was a fun process. So we just I brought the idea to my boss, and I said, I'd like to try this out. I mean, I think a lot of people are doing this. We didn't spend a lot of money on it. I had a little like tiny handheld recorder, and the sound was fine. And I thought, well, let's just try this. And so one of my colleagues here at ABA, who's gone on to work for one of our members now, he and I kind of got together and said, well, let's try out this format. And what we did was we'd spend like 10 minutes kind of bantering about a couple headlines in the news that week. Yeah. And, this is what, here's some issues that should be on your radar screen from our daily newsletter, just making sure that people were aware of these kind of particularly hot issues. And then we would have 10 minutes of a guest, someone who'd written an article for us, or a banker. And what we realized, so we launched this as a pilot, and we said, I'm like, if this gets, if we can get, I don't know, like 500 downloads of this in the first couple weeks, I'll consider it worth continuing to do. So, and
right.
we did. We beat that.
Now 5 years later.
Yeah, no, and now we're well over 500. I mean, we had a record month in March 2022, and we're just on track for over 100,000 downloads a year, and so there's a lot of interest and a lot of good energy around it. But that it started very small, and we took a lot of feedback from people, and one of the things we changed after the first couple months, we heard from people. They're like, I don't really need the news piece, but I do like the interview part the best. And so we're like, all right, well, let's just make this an interview show.
There you go.
So it's 20-ish minutes, and we have usually a banker, sometimes ABA staff, sometimes talking about, particularly if we have to talk about a hot issue that's in the news, where we want bankers to be aware of kind of what we're doing, what our advocacy position is, that kind of thing. And sometimes we'll have kind of issue experts, economists, or analysts, or book authors, if there's a kind of a particularly interesting topic that we want to cover, and that's how we figure out who we want to have on. One of the challenges we have is that, and I'm sure you get this for the Association 100 podcast, is that once your podcast starts, you start getting PR pitches from industry providers. And
yes.
We have a great relationship with industry providers. They help us out with content all the time on the ABA Banking Journal site, and in our print and digital channels. They have a great relationship with us as an association. We really value our industry provider partnerships. But I realized I did not want to have industry providers as guests on the podcast, because it really it's really hard for it not to feel like a product pitch in a webinar.
Right,
commercial.
It's just like,
yeah.
I know. And I was like, oh, this is not, like I tried it a couple times, and I was like, this is just, it doesn't feel quite right. And if I say yes to one or two, I got to say yes to a lot of other ones. And so I just said, I don't have vendors on the show. And the way I engage with, a PR person for a vendor is, what I would encourage them to do is if they have a banker who's using their product, I would love to talk to that banker. We'll talk about a lot of other stuff, but if they want to weave in some information about this particular vendor that they're working with, that's fine. But I really want to make this a peer-to-peer learning exercise for our bankers. I think that's the most valuable thing that we can do as the American Bankers Association on this show. So that's kind of how we think about who comes on the show as guests.
That's great. I love how you've learned through experimenting.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's, that's trial and error. That's the way to do it, and not being afraid to test things out and then pull the plug if you need to. How often are you producing episodes?
We release episodes every week, and then we take August off because, it's an episode a week is a lot. And, we did the first, we did our first season. We put episodes out through August, and after that I was like, if this is going to be sustainable long term, I'm going to take August off. So and not as many people are listening in August. That's what we also found. So that's one of our it was one of our slower months in general. People are on the road, they're not catching up with their podcast feeds as much, so we're just gonna take a little break there. But it's every week all year round except for August.
Yeah. So you talked about this really being a way to engage your members possibly and get the message out to them. Does your audience extend beyond your membership?
It does, but we're not really speaking to them. So if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
There is I know that there are policymakers who listen to this show. I know that there are people in the media who listen to this show. I know obviously there are industry providers, people in the non-bank financial services space who listen to the show because we'll get feedback from them and hear from them from time to time. So, but our focus on the show is people who are ABA members or potential ABA members, people who work for FDIC insured banks, and that's what we focus on in terms of how we think about the content that we're providing to them.
Great. I mean, you take on some really tough, complicated topics, from compliance to banking, advocacy issues. How do you approach some of these episodes?
Okay, so for the tough conversations, what I like to do is have one of my colleagues on to say the tough thing. So I don't have
Passing the buck.
Yeah, I am the host. I'm on this side of the mic, and I get to ask you the hard questions, and then someone else gets to be the one who takes the hard position. No, I'm joking there, but it's the most important thing I think is when you are talking about a challenging topic is to address it honestly, address it forthrightly, not to kind of beat around the bush, not to be apologetic. If there, I don't think we need. I don't think as an industry, I don't think we have anything we need to really be apologetic for. As at a broad scale, we're here to tell the story of the industry. So, if we're having if there's an issue that's kind of controversial in the news, what I try and do is approach it very factually and say, this issue is generating a lot of heat right now. Let's have on maybe one of our issue experts to break down why it's generating heat, and then what bankers can expect from Washington, or what bankers can expect, in terms of changes down the road, and in terms of investments or technology trends or whatever happens to be challenging the industry, but really to be transparent about this is a hot issue. This is something where there's a lot of controversy and there's some differing opinions about this, and so we're gonna acknowledge that, and then we're gonna talk about why bankers need to be aware about whatever this topic is.
I mean, you've mentioned that you had the vendors on, and that wasn't something that you felt was really beneficial to your members. And some of these complicated episodes. Aside from all of that, do you have a favorite episode that you've done in the past 5 years?
I wouldn't say I have a favorite. I know that our most downloaded one was the one we did in early April 2020, where we had on one of our issue experts at ABA who was in very close contact with the Small Business Administration, and he was answering some of these key questions, very early questions that people had about the Paycheck Protection Program. Nobody knew about the Paycheck Protection Program. That episode was getting downloaded by, just small business owners who are like, how do I apply for a Paycheck Protection Program loan? I have no idea how to do this. So it was very early April, very confusing. So that was, that kind of thing. There's a banker interest obviously in that, but there's also just a broader public interest in getting any information about this. And our site traffic on our whole the ABA Banking Journal website just exploded in spring of 2020 because we had the general public coming in to say, we would like to get more information about this. So that's our most downloaded episode. Looking back, I have there are a few that are kind of were particularly fun. We did an episode with Brian Brooks, who was the acting comptroller of the currency during the final 8 months or so of the Trump administration, talking about some of his agenda. He was a very fast-moving regulatory official. And then we did a two-part episode with the outgoing chairman of the FDIC, Yelena McWilliams, before her departure earlier this year. That was pretty newsy and got some interest. That was those were sort of fun to do. I enjoy the conversations with our members and learning from them. And then I'm also a history buff, so I will sometimes, I exercise the right of the podcast co-host to say, I'm going to do an episode about this. And we're going to talk about how Calvin Coolidge was a bank president early on in his career as a lawyer. And we're going to talk about about Maggie Walker, the first African-American woman to start a bank in the early 20th century in Richmond, Virginia. We're going to talk about X, Y, and Z interesting aspect of banking history, and try and broaden out the people's awareness of the importance of this industry, not just now, but throughout American history.
I love that. So speaking of that, I mean, how do you approach planning out your editorial calendar?
So it's a little more seat of the pants than probably other podcasts are. Y'all are very organized.
We're still new.
We just started.
I can learn a lot from y'all. So one of the great things I should just say here, one of the great things about this podcast is that we do have a team of co-hosts, and so I'm the producer of the podcast, and I don't ask anybody else to kind of jump into the seat of editing it and everything. But I have a great team of co-hosts, and they're people from around the organization, staff whose jobs are not necessarily in communications. But they're people who are great at having a conversation and asking intelligent questions and thinking through how we can, who would be a good person to talk to. And so I'll kind of sit down with co-hosts and we'll say, do you have any ideas for who we should reach out to? Okay. Sometimes I get, obviously some press PR pitches for, a particular guest, or I'll hear someone at a conference. I try and do, now that we're having in-person conferences again, I look through the attendee list and I say, I've always wanted to talk to, Nicole Almeida from Bay Coast Bank. I've always wanted to talk to Pinkaj Cloakingay from Old Point National Bank. And I'll reach out to them and say, hey, can we sit down on the sidelines of this conference and talk for 15 minutes? And I want to learn about X, Y, or Z that you have going on at your bank. And that's kind of how I'll put it together. And then there are some times when, because we do offer our guests a chance to review the episode first, make sure that they are comfortable with everything, and sometimes they have internal approval processes that they need to go through. We will, there might be a time where I'm like, we're waiting a little bit on this approval process, so I'm going to have to sub in a different episode that we have ready to go this week. And then there are times where I say, we've got a super hot issue in the news and we need to cover that. So we had a webinar a few weeks ago with the Office of Foreign Asset Control at the Treasury Department. Several senior officials from OFAC were on to talk about the Ukraine sanctions and what bankers need to know about them. And then so we had our lead expert on anti-money laundering and Bank Secrecy Act and sanctions issues here at ABA. We literally got on a Zoom call with him 30 minutes after the webinar ended, and he kind of recapped what the lessons from this webinar for bankers to be aware of.
That is great.
And you'd think, that's just something that large banks that have are involved in global trade finance and transaction banking and stuff need to be aware of. But sanctions can apply to every financial institution, and you may have you may be a small community bank, but maybe you have a client who's has a supplier in Russia or Belarus or something like that, and that client, you need to be aware of the impact of that client's transactions going to and from some of these financial institutions. So there's a lot of things for bankers to be aware of, and that's one of the things we talked about on the show. And so the news will often drive. If we want to communicate something, I'll switch up our editorial calendar a lot. It's always it's a very fluid document.
I like that flexibility, though, because
Yeah.
it's more useful then for people listening if it's relevant and timely.
Yeah.
So.
So some of our content, we'll have a conversation with someone, and it's not especially newsy. We're talking about leadership issues, or we're talking about various management issues that bankers are dealing with. We're talking about like cybersecurity, all kinds of things that bankers are addressing on any given day. And those episodes can sit for a few weeks, or so before we put them up there online. But then we mix that in with things that are very newsy, and we try and get there are times when I have recorded something and literally put it up on the same day.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what is one thing you wish you had known before you started the podcast?
One thing I wish I'd known, this is a funny story, but is that you better really listen to your ambient noise in your environment, because before we had like decided we're going to do this podcast for real and we got invested in good mics, I was doing an interview with a banker in a small office at his bank in Denver, and the air conditioning was on, and I didn't think it was very loud.
No.
And then I got plugged in the thing to edit it, and I was like, oh my gosh,
What
this sounds like we are
happened?
standing on the deck of an aircraft carrier. This is terrible. What have I done? But that's the kind of one lesson is like, I learned by doing when the editing and the sound piece. I do not have a background in audiovisual production at all. So this was all learning by doing, and that was a fun part. It's like we're adding to a skill set that I didn't have, and I always enjoy doing that. I think one of the things that's important to learn is things that I hadn't thought about. I think the thing that's most important is to go in without a script. And this is sometimes I have guests who say, "Oh, can we get all the questions in advance?" And I always just say no, because I will give you a list of topics that we're going to hit. I'll give you the four corners of what I want to talk about, so you're not unprepared. But I am not going to give you a script, because if the guest goes into it thinking that this is exactly what it's going to be like, it will feel scripted every time. And I always want to be able to surprise a guest with a question at some point, or to make them think about something a little differently. Again, within the four corners of the topics that I said we're going to talk about. But just to say, this is going to be a human conversation, and it's going to sound better. And trust me, it's going to sound better if it's a human conversation.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned earlier you learned that August had to be off. You had to have some recharge time. It couldn't be every week. What other areas have you found challenges that you've had to address?
I think there have honestly not been a lot of challenges. When we switched to work from home, we did most of our episodes in person. We'd kind of figured out how to do them over the phone, using Skype at different times when we had to be remote with someone. But we did most of them in person, learning how to use Zoom, and what made for a good audio experience using Zoom was something that we all learned during COVID, early COVID.
A tough experience.
And now it's very much, I'm glad we're having this conversation in person, but because I do think the in-person conversations are better. But we've gotten much better at doing Zoom and knowing how to use it, and it allows us to be a little more expansive in who we can have on the podcast at any given time. So
yeah. Do you think so? One thing that we've experienced with just how much Zoom was used, and it was especially in video more so than audio, that the expectation of the quality is not necessarily. So if there is an audio blip, I feel like people are more forgiving.
I absolutely.
Or if someone's internet cuts out, people seem to understand that better.
Yes.
Than if 3 years ago you did that on your podcast, I feel like someone would just be like, "Oh, well, I'm not going to listen."
No, there was an episode where we were having crazy audio difficulties, and there was a great interviewee. She was really, really fantastic interviewee, but then the audio just was like halfway through she had some internet issue, and it was a disaster. And so she finally rejoined on her phone, and the sound quality wasn't as good. But I'm like, I want to respect your time, so we're just going to keep on going. But the sound, the sound quality was so different from the first half to the second half.
Oh,
and so I was like, well, I'm just going to kind of leave in the whole well, are you still there? We can't hear you. And then I put in some little elevator music.
There you go.
that.
Okay, we're back. Just I'm like, all right,
Hey,
this
that's
is
a good way
this
to
is
handle
the this
it.
is the real life and the real podcasting.
Yeah, it happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw how many people on the news where you're having a video interview and someone's child is in the back,
Yeah.
the background. I mean, we've gotten
I know we
used
all
to-
became BBC Dad.
Yes,
from,
Right?
yes, we most definitely did.
Still one of my favorite videos.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, people have a lot of tolerance for that. One of the things we do, it's not a video podcast, and that makes people very much more comfortable in participating. And I think there's always a concern among some people. They're like, I just want to make sure if I'm doing video that it's like perfect.
Right.
And
Yes.
I always say, well, it's not video, so you can
Right.
relax.
We were just talking
Yeah.
about this the other day. There's something about the audio only that
Mhm.
raises everyone's comfort level and just seems to make it fall back into a conversation. Whereas when you're on camera, you're on, and it's more like professional mode rather than you don't always get the real person that
Yeah.
way.
Right.
And then the other challenge, of course, with video is that it's no longer passive content, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's got to be you put it up, it's up on your phone, and you can't like watch it in the background,
Right.
and
Yes.
and you can't, you've got it up on your computer. It's not something that you can listen to while you're engaging in some other task. It does demand all your attention, and so it kind of defeats the purpose of one of the reasons we wanted to offer this channel in addition to the other channels that we already have.
Awesome. Well, this has been a really great conversation on podcasting. We'd like to do some fun get to know you questions
Absolutely.
too for our audience here.
Yes. So where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee,
Oh, nice.
but I don't have a southern
Memphis.
accent because my family is all from the Seattle, Washington area.
Okay.
So we are but I did grow up in Memphis, but I've lived in DC for 16 years, and DC is home now.
This is a great place to live. If you won the lottery tomorrow, would you be one of those people who worked?
Oh, absolutely.
You would.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
You wouldn't even take a step back. And
I'd probably figure out something else to do, but I would have work to do. So
Okay.
yeah, no, I had this several years ago. I had the only time I've ever gone viral on Twitter was I put out my idea to the world. It was like the Mega Millions jackpot had gotten up to like close to $1 billion or
Yes.
something like that, and I said, well, my idea is like, if you get this jackpot, the only way to do this is to establish a charitable foundation with it. And because you don't give it to yourself. If you take the money for yourself, everybody's coming after you. People come out of the woodwork and they want your money. And like all the research shows that taking lottery winnings is terrible for your emotional well-being, your mental health, your physical health, your financial well-being over the long run, right? Most people are not capable of handling that. So put it all into a foundation. And my kind of snarky way of talking about it is like, if it's all in a foundation, you get to become a philanthropist, and everybody thinks that you're your jokes are always funny, and everybody wants to have you come and speak to their events and take you to lunch, and you basically get to move into this lifelong, like, $1 billion is enough to set up a foundation that can do a lot of good in the world for a very long time.
Yes.
So you get to do good in the world, and at the same time live kind of this wonderful life as someone who's loved by everyone in the community, and that's the way to spend your lottery winnings. And I was kind of being snarky about it at the time, but I do actually think that was probably how I would approach it if I ever won the lottery, which I'm not going to do because I don't buy lottery tickets.
Right.
But if I did.
What is your favorite movie or TV show?
So this is a tough one. I have young kids, and so we just don't watch a lot of like TV. We don't have time to watch a lot of TV shows. It's like we'll have kind of like one thing that we have going at any given time, and it's like Ted Lasso, probably most recently.
Yes,
but,
that was ours.
But I have thoughts about the season 2 of Ted Lasso, but we don't need to get into it here. It's like all I have to say is like TV shows need a villain. But
Yes.
some of my favorite movies are movies made by a guy named Whit Stillman, kind of indie filmmaker who started work in the 80s and 90s and made movies like Metropolitan and Barcelona and The Last Days of Disco, and they're very funny and wry, and there will be these kind of yuppies sitting in a nightclub talking about, revisionist interpretations of Lady and the Tramp, and they're really funny. So if I had to think of like what's a movie that and Metropolitan takes place over Christmas vacation among kind of New York City's debutante class, which is not my world, but it's very funny and enjoyable. And my wife and I watch it every year on Christmas Eve while we're wrapping presents. So it's
love
kind
that.
of our
That's
Christmas tradition.
great.
But yeah,
Dogs or cats?
I'm allergic to both. I know. So I did not grow up.
I know. We're both big dog people. So.
Like, I like dogs. I like cats. I just can't spend a lot of
allergic, there's
time with
nothing
them.
you can do, though.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
tough.
Everybody said, "Oh, well, you should get one of those like Portuguese water
that
dogs,
doesn't
or
work.
And I'm just
You
like,
could have a golden doodle. That's what we have.
Yeah.
And my husband supposedly is allergic, and I think it was just more like he didn't want a dog. So,
okay.
we do have her.
It was something, but I didn't grow up with it because of everyone in my family was allergic to one thing or another, and in my case both, and so we just didn't grow up with pets, and now I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm used to not having a pet, but it's dogs, but both I enjoy being around dogs and cats outdoors, and they're both animals are fun.
Right. And then how about something you miss from the pre-pandemic days?
So I thought a lot about this, and I work here. We're here in downtown DC at the American Bankers Association, and it was late February 2022 when we came back when people started coming back regularly. I had been coming back for since September 2020, just because I live in a DC row house. I have 3 kids. My wife also works from home. She did pre-pandemic. And so there is not a lot of space in our house.
Yes.
And once we kind of had the childcare situation sorted out, I was like, all right, I'm heading back to the office. It's not far from me. I mean, I don't have to commute, a long way to get here. So it's easy for me to come in, and I can have that mental separation from work and home that you didn't get in the early days of the pandemic when, I just roll out of bed and start working on typing up stuff about the PPP or like whatever the crazy thing the Fed was doing to stabilize the economy, and and we're working on like Saturdays and Sundays because the SBA is putting out guidance that banks really need to know about, and they need it like now because the bankers were working like crazy hours all night and day during the Paycheck Protection Program to get funds to their clients. So it was we had to work like crazy, and it was a good way for me to resetting the boundaries. And I have just found I really love having people back in the office now. It's so nice to be able to just pop down the hall, knock on a door, solve a problem quickly. The information, the flow of just information, I find is better when we're all in person, and so that's what I miss is sort of the casual information sharing and knowledge building that happens. And it's a challenge for any organization. I feel like my employer ABA has just we did a really good job of pivoting to remote work, and one of the reasons we did that is because we had a really high trust culture here before.
That's good, yes.
And now we have a huge number of our staff. I'd say probably 15% of our staff have joined since COVID, and so we're rebuilding that in some ways. We're getting. I have several people on my team who have joined. Since half of my team is new since COVID, so we're onboarding people and figuring out how to build these connections, and that's a challenge. And I kind of miss that part of the pre-pandemic life, the ease of building those connections, and it's. For me, it's just a new muscle to learn.
Yeah.
That's a new muscle to stretch, a new skill to learn. It's not something I'm great at right now, but I look forward to getting better at it.
Well, it's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, that's how I try to think about things. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Evan, thank you so much. You're our first official guest on our podcast, as our first one was just the 2 of us. But we love this conversation.
Well, I hope people will. I hope I didn't break it, and people will come back for more. So
people definitely will.
All right. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Association 100 podcast, brought to you by the A100 Publishing Team, powered by Onward and Upward Marketing and Communications. You can subscribe to the Association 100 podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all of your favorite podcast listening apps so you'll never miss out. Or listen via our website at theassociation100.com. Follow us on Twitter at Association100. That's Association100, for all the latest insights and trends impacting the world of associations. Thanks for tuning in.